All right. Welcome back, Try 312 crew. Very excited today and hopefully for the next several days and several weeks of being able to interview and connect with so many great athletes that we have worked with or have befriended over the years that are either one time or multiple time participants and finishers of the Chicago Triathlon. And today I'm very excited to have with us Chrissy Gratz, who has been one of my athletes and has been a great friend for several years now. I think we're going on 6 years, something like that, Chrissy.
Something like that, yeah.
So I'm very excited to have her to come on to interview because I feel Chrissy has a wonderful story about her journey through and into triathlon and has great insight and great tips, logistical tips that will be great for any newcomers to the Chicago Triathlon, both this year and hopefully into the coming years. So Chrissy, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm excited to chat and catch up.
Great. So Chrissy, tell us a little bit about your story. So first and foremost, how long have you been participating in triathlon?
Yeah, so I actually started doing triathlons back in 2018. And I think since then have done probably 15 or 20 different triathlons and also an aqua bike, one or two of those in there as well. So, yeah.
And what's been your longest distance to date?
Yes, I have done 3 70.3s. Back in 2019, actually, I signed up to do Steelhead for 2020 and ultimately did not pan out doing Steelhead in 2020, but did find out that I needed hip surgery in 2020. And so I had my left labrum kind of reconstructed in 2020. And it took a little bit of time to get back into actually like running and feeling my best from that. So I postponed that 70.3 again in 2021. I rolled it over into 2022. And so in 2022, I did both Steelhead and then later in the year got the opportunity to do it as a team race with the Chicago Athletic Club Tri Clubs up in Michigan, in Frankfurt. And then kind of kept the party rolling. And I ended up doing 70.3 Hawaii in the spring or early summer of 2023.
That's awesome. And I love the fact that you've built it all the way up to the iron distances and have done all the race distances leading up to that. So Now thinking and reflecting even well before that, what was it? Why triathlon? What got you into the sport? What was the motivating factor? What was your journey to start triathlon in the first place?
In
the first place. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like you don't just like randomly one day wake up and you're like, I'm going to do a triathlon. Maybe for some people. That actually was not true for me. So I actually back in 2013, end of 2013, had really kind of thought to myself, I wanted to just make some changes in my life to be a healthier version of myself. And I wasn't really sure what that was at the time. But I knew that it was becoming harder and harder for me to do kind of things that I enjoyed doing, that I had energy and excitement around, and found myself to be pretty, just feeling like I wanted to try something new, but I didn't really know where that would pan out. And later that year, in 2014, I was working with a colleague who had talked about she was doing sprint triathlons. And I thought that sounded so neat. It was something that I hadn't really thought about. I had friends that were marathon runners and constantly were out doing halves and fulls. And I knew that running it didn't sound that exciting to me. But I was interested in like some sort of kind of activity or hobby. And I had around 2014 kind of decided like, well, that triathlon idea sounds really cool, but I haven't swam since I was a kid. I think 5th grade was like the last time I swam a lap in a pool. I hadn't been on a bike since I was a kid, and I actually couldn't even like run a mile straight. And so I was really kind of starting in a place where like I had no idea how to do any of the things, and it sounded like an intriguing challenge. So I started to kind of just prioritize my health in general, started drinking more water, started moving my body more. And it actually took quite a while. Like I said, I didn't start doing triathlons until 2018. I ended up having a different hip surgery in 2015. And so that was a little bit of kind of like a curveball then too. I had hoped to be able to do a triathlon probably closer to like 2016, 2017. But because I had hip surgery, things just kind of kept getting delayed. And then I actually got the opportunity to watch one of my best friends, her name is Lindsay, do the Chicago Triathlon back in 2017. And I remember thinking like, yes, this is it. I definitely want to do it. She kind of like took me under her wing back in 2018, brought me to some of the open water swims, helped me build some like confidence in belief in myself that I could do some of these things. And so I actually got the opportunity. I did do a small sprint prior to Chicago. I think I just wanted to make sure I felt like I could do it, or I had like tried it myself once. But then I actually got the chance to do it with her in 2018. And so through that journey, I actually, I lost a significant amount of weight. I learned a lot about myself, and all of the things that I really didn't know how to do. I spent a lot of time learning how to kind of re-swim and how to ride a bike again. I bought a bike from Working Bikes that was just like a used road bike that first time around, just to remember what it felt like to ride a bike again. So it was a really fun journey between those years of kind of like learning how to do things that I thought I couldn't do before. And so that was a kind of just like a fun foray into learning how to do triathlon.
Yeah. So when you attended that first race with Lindsay, was there something specific about watching her, being in that environment, experiencing the race, that was the one thing that really pulled you in? They're like, yes, this is what I want to do. What was that?
Yeah. So I actually remember her parents came to watch the race and cheer her on. And we were all standing on the bridge that goes over the bike path.
Yeah.
And I remember watching all of the bikers just kind of like zooming on by down there by the railroad tracks. And I remember she like looked up and waved to us. And she just like honestly, genuinely looked like she was having the best time. And so now that I've had the opportunity to do this race, that's always like that moment right there is like one of my favorites. I like to like wave at all the people because they're all cheering on their loved ones. But that is like one of the moments that really resonated with me when I was watching her do it. And then obviously the finish line, of course. But I think it was just like such a unique, you don't get to see Chicago in the way in which you get to when you're doing the triathlon. And I think that was like a prime example of the different ways in which you're able to like actually be in the city and experience the city.
Yeah, because how often, besides like maybe Bike to Drive, do you actually get to ride your bike on Lakeshore Drive?
Yep. Yep. Or even in like Lower Wacker. I obviously didn't get to see her
Especially
ride
Lower
it.
Wacker on the
Yeah.
bus route down on the lower bit, like underneath like Grant Park and Millennium Park, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
So, and I think that's one other thing that happens when people participate in the Chicago Triathlon for the first time and they're riding their bike on Lakeshore Drive, also because this usually happens before Bike the Drive. And it is an experience where they go, there's hills on Lakeshore Drive. And they just don't realize that when you're going over an overpass, that there's a little bit of elevation, because when you're just driving on it, you're just like, oh, this is just a flat road from point A to point B. And then all of a sudden you get on your bike and you're like, oh gosh, there's a hill there. There's another hill. Oh my gosh, there's a massive hill going back up, going south, going up onto the bridge, over the river. And that can be sort of a little bit of a surprise when you get out there for the first time. So for those that might be watching that are looking for last minute tips, just remember that there are hills, they are overpasses on Lakeshore Drive. So be sure to make adjustments in your gearing if you haven't already learned to do so, but try to get good gearing skills in so that you're able to get into an easier gear to get up those hills and make it a little bit easier, especially since when you come out of transition, the first thing you have to hit is a hill to get up onto Lakeshore Drive and to get over the river. So it's a little bit of a surprise for some athletes where, I mean, I've seen, Chrissy, I don't know if you've seen, but I know when I've gone out, coming out of T1, going into the bike, going up that first hill, that people aren't in the correct gear and sometimes have to get off their bike and actually walk their bike up that hill. That it's actually an off ramp going off of Lakeshore Drive right around Randolph. So that's something that everyone should be aware of, and making sure to get into the correct gear, a light gear that will make it easier for you to ride up that hill, that off ramp. And then once you get up on top there, then it's a nice flat. You can readjust, get into a stronger gear, because then the next benefit is that if you have to go up, then you get to go down. And it's a long, strong downhill coming off Lakeshore Drive, right off of Ohio Street Beach, going off close that turn to North Avenue Beach. And you can just get that good free speed going off to that first mile or two.
Definitely.
Yeah. Any other thoughts or suggestions on that?
I was going to say on the bike course, I feel like the one thing that I'm always a little bit I don't know if stressed is the right word, hesitant, I wear glasses to see. And so I do have prescription sunglasses. But then when you're in or heading, especially if you're doing the Olympic distance, the going into lower whacker, there's a really significant change in the light.
Yeah.
And so I'm always like, what do I do? Do I like whip out these glasses and put them on rather than my prescription sunglasses? So I kind of just play it easy and try to like get acclimated with my eyes heading down into lower whacker before I'm like cranking it down there. Because once you're down there, it's a blast. I definitely recommend, there's lots of people yelling. It's very echoey. It's fun. But before you like get real hype, make sure that you can see well and that your eyes get accustomed to just being darker.
Yeah, I think that's a great tip. Looking back to that first year where you felt like you've come out of surgery, you've recovered, you felt like you can start getting back into training or start training for the triathlon. What was that like? What was your experience like? What was that first couple of weeks, the first month or two starting to train? Were you doing it alone? Had you already found a tri club to train with? And how did it feel? Did it feel like overwhelming, a little daunting at first? Or do you feel like you were able to pace yourself well enough that you didn't get discouraged or felt burnt out right out of the gate?
Yeah, I'll be honest, I really had no idea what I was doing. I think I was not part of a group back in 2018 or really had any sort of formal training plan. I remember I Googled like how to train for a triathlon and I didn't understand any of that because I was just so new. And I knew that it like required swimming, biking, and running. And for me, my priority to start off with was just getting comfortable doing those things and learning. That's something that I value, is just trying to like learn and grow. And I've really just did that. I really, like I said, I learned how to swim in open water for the first time. And so I went to a few clinics with the open water, swim group just to learn how do you sight, how do you put on a wetsuit? Like I had never experienced any of those things before. And so really just like, it was a lot of newness and a lot of learning. And I think that like, I wasn't so focused on the, gosh, I've got to get this workout in, or, oh, this one, I have to hit the exact mileage for this workout. I kind of had like a rough estimate, like based off of the plan of like, oh, you should aim to, bike this far or bike for this long. But at the same time, it was more about just like building comfort. Like, am I comfortable on my bike? Am I comfortable putting on a wetsuit so that I don't feel like I'm having a panic attack? Because if you don't put it on right, it's really uncomfortable. So that was really just kind of the first year. And I remember going to my first race and being really nervous. And fortunately, it was the Wisconsin Women's Triathlon, and everybody there was so helpful, but they were there to like help me figure out how to set up my transition. I had watched like a YouTube video on it, but I didn't really know otherwise how to do those things. And so, like I said, it was definitely just like a lot of learning, a lot of growing, but I think that that's what I needed in that moment, because I was able to look back at how much I had grown over the course of that time, of like really not even thinking I could swim at all, let alone go then and actually complete multiple open water swims. Like that was something that I was incredibly proud of, just because it had been so long. Same thing with the bike. Like I remember I got my bike from Working Bikes. And I remember one morning, it was a Tuesday morning, and I went out and I rode it for 8 miles just on like trails around where I live. And I was so excited. I was like, gosh, I like rode 8 miles this morning before work even started.
Yeah.
And I remember feeling that like sense of like proud, like accomplishment, that sense of like, I'm doing things I didn't think I could do, and I'm learning something new every single time. And I think I just got a lot of energy from that. And so it was actually, and I don't know if you have another question here, but I was thinking about like, after that first season was over, I was like, I think there's a lot more here that I should be doing that I don't know about.
You don't know what you don't know yet. Yeah.
Exactly. I was just making it up. And I actually went to the Chicago Athletic Club Triathlon Club, had some like winter engagements, and one of them was with you. And I actually attended one that was like a pool clinic. And then after swimming in the pool, we hopped on the spin bikes. And I remember it was like the first time I'd ever done a catch-up drill. And I genuinely thought, I was like, how did I go from swimming in open water not too long ago to feeling like I'm drowning in this pool? Because I'd never done even like a catch-up drill in my life. And so I think that was when like I knew it. There was way more learning to be done here than just stopping after those first few races that I did back in 2018.
Yeah. And I think what you're alluding to here too, and describing, which I think is also very helpful and beneficial to those that may be doing this for the first time and probably feeling as you did, or as many of us do, doing that first triathlon, which is feeling overwhelmed and going, I don't know anything. I think I've done enough. I hope I don't drown. I just want to finish, is to go into the events and just be a sponge and learn, ask questions, and not have a time in mind or like how well you want to perform necessarily, but just to be able to learn the things that are unique to triathlon, that transitions, like doing them effectively or just being able to get through it, especially as large as Chicago is as an event. I mean, it's one of, if not still the largest triathlon event in the world. And if you've never done a triathlon before, which Chrissy, you mentioned that you had done a smaller race beforehand. I think if anybody gets a chance to maybe sign up for a shorter race before doing Chicago, I highly recommend it, because if you've never done this event before and you're already feeling overwhelmed, there's a lot to it. You're trying to put three disciplines together, and I've never gone through the transition of going from an open water swim to going onto the bike and then coming back and then going out for a run and then finishing in the event and then going, now what? How do I get all my stuff again? That when you go to a race like Chicago, it can be very overwhelming and very intimidating, because that morning that you get there on race day, and there's just thousands and thousands of bikes and transition areas and athletes and spectators and officials and volunteers. I mean, it can be a lot. So if you do get a chance to go in and do a smaller race and where it not be as overwhelming, and feel a little bit more comfortable talking to your neighbor, to the athlete next to you that's doing their transition, they look like they know what they're doing. Like, hey, can you help me out? Like, what is this supposed to look like? Especially if you don't have a coach or haven't had the opportunity to be part of a club that might be going through a lot of these things with you guys and helping you learn those things, is ask, right? Because I think one of the things that I know keeps bringing me back that I love about this sport is the community of people that we kind of surround ourselves with. Is more often than not, I may even dare say almost 100% of the time, if you look around and you ask, somebody will be willing to help you and give you some guidance or give you some extra encouragement, some motivation, some tips. And that is absolutely helpful. I mean, I know I was intimidated in my first one. I wasn't sure how I was going to do. I felt confident being able to put it all together. But then I also got into transition and never seen it before, going, oh God, I really don't know what I'm doing here. Like, I was still the person like putting like safety pinning my race number on NT2 going, I'm pretty sure there's a faster way to do this. And this isn't correct, because like people are running through here, like grabbing something and then leaving. And I'm still like 5 minutes in going, is this right? Is this going to stay? And it may have also been me just trying to delay, because I'm not a fast runner. I don't enjoy running as much, although that has been changing. So, which I really appreciate.
Nice.
And I like it now because I don't have knee pain at the moment. So fingers crossed that continues. But anyway, at the time I've been still having some knee issues, some IT band stuff. And so maybe it was just me delaying trying to get out onto the run. But I realized very quickly, is like, this is probably incorrect, but what am I going to do? I mean, they provided the safety pins and the race packet that you picked up for that race. And so I'm assuming this is what you do. But sometimes you just kind of have to go through these learning experiences and know that you don't know everything, and go with it with, more eyes wide open and becoming a sponge and learning about the event. And again, not worrying about how well you perform, and just appreciate that you got there and learn and see what happens, and put sort of a time on the board. And then you go, okay, if that's something like you kind of get the bug, and it's something that an event and experience that you appreciate and want to try to do more of those things, then you can start going, okay, I now know I have areas where I can improve, which it sounds like you were like, okay, I got through it. There's probably way more than I can learn here and do better at. And that becomes then the next step of how a lot of people really sort of dive head first into the sport and can be able to do it and want to be able to do it potentially for a lifetime, which is what I think I love most about the sport, because it was those men and women that at the time you would still see their age number on the back of their calf as an identifier of their age group. And I remember being out on that first bike ride, and I was not going fast. I think I was still on my small chain ring, still biking on a flat road in Florida, and thinking like, wow, I don't know how to get any more speed out of this bike. And you're seeing like 50, 60, 70-year-old men and women like in super tri bikes just hammering it, like just smoking past me. And I was like, it's very humbling, but at the same time, very motivating, because you're like, man, I want to be them when I grow up. Right.
Right.
So anyway, it's good to just sort of come into this race, come into this world, be open-minded, have eyes wide open, experience for what it is, and be a sponge and just learn as much as you can. And I think the other thing that you talked about, Chrissy, is that, like when you go into it and you're not quite sure how you're going to, if you're going to like it or not, like, don't feel like you have to buy a super bike right out of the gate. That's not required. I mean, if you can go get a bike from, a used bike from a bike shop or from a friend, as long as it's somewhere in the range of what your bike should fit you for, right? So like at least do some due diligence and learn and discover what size bike you should have, or something in the ballpark of what frame and dimensions work right for you. Then you don't need to you can spend a couple $100s on a quality bike that's going to get you through the race. And at that point, if you feel like you want to continue on and further make that investment in yourself and into the sport, then you can start looking at like higher end bikes, and then it becomes an addiction. We'll get into that later. But start off and be frugal, be reasonable, and think of it as that, like, I'm just going to try this out, see what happens. I mean, this is all the reason why they have a divvy division in the super sprint on the Saturday before. So if you don't even have a bike, that's another way to experience the race and see if it's something that you might want to get into, and then think about making the investment for yourself in the future. So I think inadvertently you gave a great piece of advice, Chrissy. Start off with a bike that may not be like the super high end couple $1,000 bike, and just see if it's something that you want to continue.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think mine was from 2003 and it was 2018 when I purchased it. It had seen some good years. And I talked to the bike shop about it. It had pretty good like components and it fit me. And that I was looking to spend $300 to $400, and that was it back then.
That's right.
And I used it actually for close to 4 years. I learned a lot on that bike. I learned how to clip it, because at the beginning, I wasn't clipping in or doing any of those things. And so I learned how to clip in on that bike. I learned all sorts of things. And that's when I realized, I was like, oh, I really love biking. And so then like you mentioned, things kind of quickly escalated after that. But I think really just figuring out like what are your goals at the beginning and making sure that you are able to, I think as you were talking about longevity and thinking about like triathlon longer term. And when I think about the people that are older or have been doing triathlons for 20, 30 years, I think so much about the community that people build through the sport. Like I know that those people aren't doing it for 20, 30 years and have just only been doing it alone. And so to your point, like make friends with the people next to you in transition, because who knows, they could become a friend of yours. I know that has happened where I've met some really incredible people that have been just racked next to me in transition and we've just been excited to kind of celebrate together at the end of races. Like we did it, like great job. But you then also
great just stories from those people too. Like they're like, like, oh, how many times have you done this race? And someone like, oh my God, it's my first time. I'm like, hey, you're going to do great. And you could be that supportive person, like giving them extra encouragement, or it's somebody that's been doing the sport for years. And like, any number of stories of like maybe challenges or struggles that they've gone through is like, hey, in fact, like last night I spoke to a kid that is coming off of like lymphoma cancer, and is doing the Chicago race for the first time because he wasn't able to do it last year because of that. So like, and I don't know about you, but like when I hear stories like that and you get the chills and you're like, oh my gosh, like that's amazing. You're now motivating me, and I've been doing this for years, and now I'm encouraged to do my best now.
Yep. I was so scared I think that's the right word, to do 70.3 Hawaii. I was a little bit under the weather. I thought about backing out. I went for it. I was like a bundle of stress that morning, and I sat next to a guy on the bus, and I'll never forget that interaction. And he was like, oh, where are you from? Have you done this before? And I was telling him all the details. I was like, definitely never done this before. And it was like his 15th, 20th time doing that race. And he just like told all these great stories about all his favorite memories and how much he loved it and how much he loved the swim. And I just, throughout the entire race, just kept thinking back to that like one moment I had in the morning. And I was like, if this man has done it 15 or 20 times, like I can go out there and like get it done today. And he wasn't wrong. That swim was incredible. So you get good tips from people that have done it before and just making those connections for sure.
Yeah. And I think something else that you mentioned there too is that, and I'm sure for when you talk to most athletes, that when you ask about their experience with the event, 9 times out of 10, I almost would think like 99 times out of 100, the thing that they are most proud about, or that is their favorite memory, has nothing to do with the time that they did it in.
Never. Absolutely not. I've never once talked to somebody and that has been their favorite memory from a race.
It's been about the people that they meet or the experience that has, like, oh, I love that swim. Oh, that bike was awesome. Like, oh, I did so great on my run, or I met this great person in transition. Like, again, all the things that you just alluded to. Sorry, you were going to mention another.
Oh yeah, no, I was just going to say, I was like, it's usually people that like have a great story about someone they met or a moment on the course where they, that they remembered that was like really meaningful to them, or just like a memory about like celebrating the
Yeah.
fact that they're there and doing it and celebrating like all the hours that people put into actually making it happen. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's
I mean,
usually never the time.
yeah. And speaking of our friends with CAC, with Chicago Athletic Clubs, we'll get back to them and us in a minute. But one of my favorite memories, and again, I was very happy with my time. That was something I was going for. It was a sub 6 hour half Ironman, and
Yeah.
even though that happened, and that was great, but my favorite part of doing 70.3 Michigan was being there with all of you guys and having that weekend experience, like all staying in the same house together, and you guys going off and exploring the area, and you and your husband going out and and him kayaking throughout the lakes, and him being our sort of like official team Sherpa.
Yeah.
So we always appreciate Alex being there and being part of our support team. Which, by the way, anyone that has a support person out there, a tri Sherpa, a significant other, a friend, a family member, whoever it is that's out there supporting you. One thing that I have now, I wish I came up with this myself, but another one of the coaches gave me this idea, and I am just taking it and running with it and offering this up to every athlete out there is whether it's the days leading up to the race or the days following, is maybe take a moment of appreciation and send out a note, an email, a letter, a text to any and everyone that you can think of that knows you're completing or competing in this, that have supported you along the way, and just give them a little bit of a shout out and just say thank you. Right? Hey, I just want, I know I've been like, because you're probably like not as social as you have been in years past, or just and can't say yes to a lot of things. But for those that are familiar with, that appreciate or have supported your sacrifice to train for this event, come back and just say thank you. And like, hey, thank you for supporting me, or thank you for your coaching, or thank you for those tips, or thank you for making this aspect of my life just a little bit easier so that I can go out and train. But I think that comes back to you tenfold, providing that appreciation. And especially if you do get the bug after this event and you decide to explore bigger distances, that you continue to show that appreciation for those that are also not only being supportive of you, but also maybe sacrificing so that you can be able to continue to do this event. And I think that makes that goes a long way, and it makes a huge difference. But knowing that we had Alex out there, all the rest of you guys participating, some that were doing the whole event, some that were just doing a relay component, and then next thing you know, they're off doing their own iron distances themselves, is just to see everybody out there in the course, like passing each other in transition or on the bike course, or seeing everybody on the run course and like giving them fist bumps or congratulating or go Chrissy, or seeing somebody from Chicago go like, yeah, Chicago, like just being part of that community and being able to see everybody out there and just knowing that you're not alone, I think makes a huge difference. That to me was my favorite experience. So now coming back to being part of a club, being part of a team, whether, there's some that might be a little bit more competitive than others, more on the social end, compared to when you started out doing it kind of on your own versus now participating or training with a group of people or with a team. Describe for us the difference that made in your training and your, maybe even the enthusiasm that you had for the sport.
Yeah, I would say I learned that I really love to do triathlon when it is with other people. And so obviously was like really proud of myself the year that I, kind of went at it a little bit alone and unguided. I learned a lot, but I definitely learned way more when I was doing it with and alongside other people. And I made so many incredible friends. And so I think that that is honestly what motivated me, is to like kind of grow together with other people over the course of a season and learn from them, especially people that had more experience than me, or, I just learned that there's so many other, like, I think I learned just about like multi-sport and endurance things that I didn't even know existed. And so personally, like I've had 3 hip surgeries in my life. Running is not my favorite. I didn't even know that there was something called aquabike. And so I like learned about that and actually got the opportunity to do some of those events, which was really fun. And I still to this day train with the CAC Tri Club. And I feel like I'm always, like I said, because I'm doing it with other people, I'm learning from them, both the athletes and the coaches alike. And that's something that I get a lot of motivation and support from. And it's also really fun to, over the years, like see what people's goals are and kind of like how we're all working together. Like you mentioned, each year, that people have different goals. And so some people are, training for half distances or full distances. Other people it's maybe their first race. And it's like just really fun to see kind of all of the different experiences and people coming together to be a part of a broader community.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, and it's fun because you always have that sort of new infusion of new athletes and new life into the sport.
Yeah.
And for those, I mean, it's a great, and I think this is probably relatively consistent across different clubs where you have a lot of people like, man, hey, these are my people. I want to continue training with them. They motivate me. They've now become some of my best friends in the city, and you see their journey, and that's also continues to be motivating. It's nice to have that continuity. And at the same time, you have new athletes coming in and they're brand new, and you see yourself in them. Like, you look like me 10 years ago or whatever it may be. And you're now the veteran, and being able to take maybe someone or several of them under your wing, like, hey, this is, kind of what you're going to experience, and this is okay, or try this. And they may be looking to you for advice and support. And, looking back, and like, if you had something that you could offer to your younger self, your newer try self, and it's kind of the things that we're imparting here, which is like, ask questions, like be open-minded, be a sponge. And if you're part of a team environment or a club environment, you have a lot of these veterans and a lot of people that have gone through things. And, those of us have like, just know just what not to do. Like, I did this wrong. It was not great, but I learned through it. So just try not to do that. And then you're just setting them up to have a much more successful experience. And especially when it comes to a big race like Chicago, is to help sort of minimize some of the anxiety that can happen, especially with as big as the race is and all the things that surround it. The number of athletes are going to be around, is the more you can kind of help them minimize their anxiety, feel a little bit more confident, not as stressed out, then everyone's going to have a better race, right? And especially depending on what could happen. Maybe the swim gets canceled. Maybe it's 90 degrees in August, and the run is just brutally hot. That a lot of us have experienced that before, and knowing sort of, hey, look, if we can anticipate what the weather is going to be like or what the context of the event is going to be like, is just allow them to roll with the unknowns that could potentially happen within a race. And we've experienced it all with Chicago. So it's just knowing to be adaptable is another thing that I think is just able to learn and absorb and be have a little bit more of awareness of when you're working with other athletes that have kind of gone through it.
Yeah, definitely.
So speaking of which, speaking of experiences, is there one experience, and it could be that same one, that first one, but is there a most memorable experience that you have from the Chicago Triathlon over the years?
Ooh, that's a good question. And I already shared the one, which is like my favorite on the bike. That like moment every year is one of my most memorable.
Just looking up on the Olympic distance and waving to everybody over.
Yeah, I love that moment. That's one of my favorites.
All right, so before we move on, so I'm going to come back to it, but for those that are doing the Olympic, where is that spot? Where should they be looking out for? Will they know it when they see it, or where should they be sort of like, I want to have that same experience Chrissy did. Like, what am I looking for?
I was going to say, I think it's, I always tell people when they're having family or friends coming to watch is to, if you're starting kind of over near where the swim start is, I forget what those cross streets are that like go over the bridges, but basically you can have your family like stand on the bridge and watch the bikers go. If you're doing the Olympic distance or the international distance, you can watch the people underneath, but I'm forgetting like what actually those streets are. And that's the moment right there where it's just like, it's really fun. Everybody's cheering for you, because the bike course, depending on where you're at on it, can be a little bit lonely because you're on Lakeshore Drive. So it's not like there's a ton of fans anywhere. And I think
Right.
that's also, there's like a lot of people right there, and they've all got posters and signs and they're cheering on their people. And so I think that's why that maybe resonates the most with me. And then the other memory that I was having was my very first one that I did. My friend had told me, because she had done it, Lindsay, it was to like put a piece of like duct tape on my swim cap. So that way, like my people that were watching me could follow along. Because what's unique about the swim course is that like your family and friends can actually watch you the entire, like walk with you while you're swimming throughout the course. And so I remember I like put like a piece of, silver tape on my swim cap so that way Alex could see it. And so it was like every time I was taking a breath to my left or whatever side he was on at that point in time, I could actually like see him. He was right there. And so I think that's like another really unique part about the course and something that I remember.
Yeah, every time my wife, Sarah, she has now been able to fully distinguish my swim stroke from every other swim stroke that's out there. So even though she couldn't see me the whole way through Ohio last year, like that last little strip going out to the exit, she was like, she caught it on camera. She's like, I just know my husband's swim stroke, and it's like that's nice. Right on cue. But every time like I see her in Chicago, and I usually when I breathe every other stroke, it's usually to my left, and so I'll see her, and I'm like, and I feel like I'm like hi, honey, like doing this very distinct wave in the water. And then I'll come out and every year I'm like, did you see me wave? She's like, no. It's
Not at all.
probably, it just looks like me just struggling with my swim stroke over the waves.
Yep.
But no, that's
That's
a great piece of advice. And again, I would say because most of the time people are it's less crowded and you're going to see most of your swim going northbound past the swim start. So when
Yep.
you go southbound and then come back north for the Olympic distance for the sprint, they're just jumping in and going straight north. So I would say something around the left side of your cap. So that's probably what they're going to see most, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Great.
Yeah.
And then last but not least, and I know we've talked about some other great tips throughout the course of this conversation or interview today. But before we got started, you were telling me that the things that you really wanted to impart on the athletes today were more logistical tips that they may not necessarily think of, like when they're just stressing about, I got to get through swim, bike, and run. There are some other like little things that are sort of around the event itself, that whole weekend. So let's talk a little bit more about that, and let's have you impart these very quality logistical tips for the weekend of the actual Chicago Tri to make sure that maybe they are just a little bit more efficient going from one thing to the next.
Yeah. So I've done the Chicago Triathlon for 4 years, but I did 5 races in those 4 years. One year I served as a guide with Dare to Try and did the super sprint. And so I've done the sprint twice, the Olympic twice, and then one of those years with the sprint, I threw in a super sprint as well. And I think like the biggest thing you want to do that entire weekend is celebrate everything that you've done the whole summer and that you've like put in the hours of work, and you want to like be with friends and family and just like be in the moment. And that's really hard when you are stressed out. There's a ton of logistics to navigate, and you're like trying to like read through 18 manuals to figure out like where to park and what to like where you're supposed to put your bike. And there's just like a lot of logistics. And so I think that like my tips are always focused on the logistics, because I'm like, if you can just get those squared away, it usually like just makes for a smoother weekend, and then you can actually do and focus on the things that matter and that you likely care about more.
Yeah.
And so I've learned over the years that usually if you want like the good swag or the gear in the right sizes to hit up the expo and the registration on Friday, which is tricky because you can only pre-rack your bike on Saturday. So you do have to bring it beforehand. And so that could mean that if you are checking in Friday, that you also need to go back on Saturday as well to drop off your bike. And so you want to kind of think about, how do you want to coordinate your weekend? Do you want to go twice downtown to drop off your stuff, or like get the good gear and do the registration? Or would you prefer to do it kind of just like in one kind of midday afternoon type of moment on Saturday? I like to get there early to rack my bike on Saturday, because it is overwhelming when there's just so many bikes and you're like, where do I even put it? So I kind of like to get there early, put my bike on the rack, and then pretend that I'm doing the swim in, the bike out, and then I pretend like I'm bringing my bike back in and doing the run out. Even though I know where they are, every year it's different because of where my bike is racked. And so I kind of do like okay, what color is my bike rack? Or how many bike racks away is it that I need to count up or back from in order to make sure? And because it looks so different the next day when all the bikes are there, I kind of repeat that the next morning before I head out of transition as well, just to make sure I know where my stuff is. And then my other secret hot tip is just to buy your parking now. Like you can open up a Spot Hero app or whatever it is, get your parking for the Millennium Garages, and then take a photo of where you parked. Because I have heard countless stories of people after the race getting lost down in the Millennium Garages because there's multiple Millennium Garages all named similarly, and then people lose their car. So I'd say those are kind of like my logistical tips. And I think the one thing that like I do before to help with some of those logistical pieces as well is like visualizing myself actually going through the day. So waking up, driving there, setting up my transition, waiting to start, actually starting the race, the swim, navigating through T1, like each of the different stages, I break it down, and I actually visualize myself like successfully completing it. Sometimes when I visualize it the first time, I'm like, wait, do I have my goggles? Where are they? Like sometimes I remind myself of like the logistics along the way, but I might actually like concretely, I remember some of the times I've done this where it's like, I actually successfully am getting my wetsuit off. It's not stuck on me. I'm like, it's off of me. I'm running to transition, and I'm like specifically looking for my red towel next to my black bike. Like I'm getting that specific only because I know and like have done some like research as a part of what I do for my job and things like that, just about like the actual benefits of visualization. And I feel like on a weekend like this, when it's overwhelming, there's a lot of logistics, there's a ton of kind of pieces, there's just a lot of people, knowing the like psychological and physiological benefits of a visualization is like super helpful, because cognitively, when you're visualizing, you're actually reinforcing that like sequence of steps that you'll go through. So it not only is building your confidence, but like actually they've shown like it does help your memory, so that when you're there, it's kind of like more automatic. And then physiologically, the mental imagery actually does have the same neural pathways as doing the real thing. So if you're imagining yourself pushing yourself in a low gear up that big hill that you were talking about, it actually helps like make that neural pathway connection, and it helps with like coordination and just the communication in general between your brain and your muscles. And so
neuromuscular coordination.
that is, yes, neuromuscular coordination. That's the word I'm looking for. But all of those things I think are things that I do in advance that are more logistical, and like focusing on visualizing going through all those steps. So that way it's just happening, and I can actually be in the moment versus feeling like, oh shoot, I forgot that, or I need that. And it just kind of is happening automatically around me, which is nice.
Yeah. As a coach, I'm very proud of everything that you're saying right now. And knowing that how many athletes I've worked with, that's the visualization component being very important, and also helping reduce your anxiety through the event. And again, visualizing like what would be a perfect day, right? And because again, a lot of times it's not going to go perfect, but what would that look like? And but being able to know like, hey, if certain things happen, like how will you adapt or adjust? But if you have that visualization, and especially doing what you're suggesting, which is, again, if you've got all the other things that you can control out of the way, the logistics and like when you set up your bike and where you're parking, and things that you can do ahead of time to minimize any unnecessary stressors, that once you actually get to the event, now you can maybe be a little bit more fresh, a little bit more zen, if you will, be a little less anxious about other things that are going on. And as you say, be present. And then being able to navigate transition. That is absolutely huge. I have this conversation, this coaching component every single year with all my athletes, whether they've done 100 races or it's their first, like just making sure, don't forget, and I still do it every single time, as you're saying that you do it every single time, navigate, because every race is going to be a little bit different. Where your bike is set up is going to be a little bit different. Who you're going to be around is going to be different. And especially with Chicago, because it is just so massive. So taking the time the day before, the morning of, once you get to your bike rack and you know physically where you are in space, and you start looking at landmarks and where trees are, where your rack is and what color it is, and how long it takes you to go from swim out to bike out, and then bike in to run out, like looking at where all those markers are, and having a sense of like, if I do all this consistently and take this route from one point to the next, I should be here, and this is where my bike should be, and where my transition area should be. Because depending on what time your wave is and how many people have gone through, or maybe in your in your rack area, then there could be moments where somebody is next to you that have already come through, have stripped their wetsuit, and that wetsuit is now on top of your stuff. So knowing like generally where you are should be able to, or where you should be able to like kind of know, okay, well, this is where my bike is, where I don't know where my transition stuff is. Oh, maybe now I could just, I think that wetsuit's maybe on top of it. I should move that off. Oh, there it is. So again, if you have that sort of visualization of like knowing where you should be, where you are, if things like that happen, you are then even better prepared for how to make those adjustments. Right.
Definitely.
Yeah. So Chrissy, I think that is all great advice. Great story. I love your journey of not only how you got here, but how you continue on, and being able to pay it back to maybe the next generation of triathletes, and for those that will be doing the Chicago Triathlon for the first time this year, and hopefully not their last. And then also them seeing this or listening to the advice, and then seeing the opportunity to maybe come back next year or subsequent years, joining a club, joining a team, joining us here on the Tri312 network, and being able to then tell their story and be able to pay it forward and give back to the community, and continue this process of helping each other out, and building a good, strong community every single year at the Chicago Tri. So Chrissy, thank you so much for being here. Last question. Are you excited about the pro race this year that's happening with Super Tri? Is that something that you're interested in and looking to experience?
Yeah, so I know that it's happening Sunday afternoon. I feel like I need to get a little bit clearer on like times and details and things, because I imagine I will need to find food and a shower. And then I feel like that's like back to that idea of visualizing. We've got more logistics this year added in order to like make it back to watch that. So I have to kind of figure out my game plan for what I'm going to do after the race. So that way I can, shower, get all of the salt and sweat off of me, and
That's a
then
great point.
enjoy the afternoon.
Yeah. So for those of you that are doing the race and if you want to stick around or come back for the pro event that will be happening that afternoon, it's tight quarters. It's more circuit style, crit style cycling, quick swims, quick runs, elimination style team events. So it's going to be fast paced, furious, fun, very spectator friendly. So hopefully, like if that's something that you guys all wanted to see and participate or experience after you've completed your race or you've supported your person in the race and you want to stick around. So just one more logistical thing to think about for your Chicago experience in 2024. So that being said, again, Chrissy, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. Great stuff, great stories. And we look forward to hopefully having a lot of our members and a lot of our viewers really take something or take a lot from your story today, from your experience and from your tips, and feel that, hey, I listened to Chrissy on this wonderful, amazing podcast that's all about Chicago triathloning. And it was this tip that really helped me get through my race and hopefully be able to have them have that much better experience in their race this season. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
And thank you. Wouldn't be here without you, Brian. So thanks.
Thanks, Chrissy.